This week, we continue a conversation on containers and Kubernetes. In the news segment, fingerprint spoofing has gone 3D. We hear about Alexa's audio. Google Next brings security tools to GA, and more. Stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production. Signal Sciences secures the most important web applications, APIs, and microservices of the world's leading companies, protecting over 7,500 applications and 150 billion production requests per week. Signal Sciences Next-Gen WAF and RASP help companies increase security and maintain site reliability without sacrificing velocity, all at the lowest total cost of ownership. Signal Sciences patented technology protects any application against any attack, with integrations into any DevOps toolchain. Signal Sciences, demand more from your WAF. Learn more at signalsciences.com/PSW.
Welcome to Application Security Weekly. This is episode 57, recorded April 15th, 2019. I'm your new host, Mike Shima. I knew enough that this is my first time welcoming all of you listeners. I'm also here with Matt Alderman, who's a familiar face on ASW, as well as Business Security Weekly. Also, John Kinsella is here as a new co-host for Application Security Weekly. Register for our upcoming webcast with ServiceNow by going to securityweekly.com/webcasts. If you have missed any of our previously recorded webcasts, you can find them at securityweekly.com/on-demand. Attending KubeCon and Cloud Native Con Europe 2019 in Barcelona, May 20 to 23, 2019. Join your peers at the Cloud Native Transformation Summit 2019, hosted by SysDig on May 20th. Our very own Matt Alderman will be emceeing the event. Pre-registration is required. You can add it on during your KubeCon plus Cloud Native Con registration. We don't have a guest today, but we do have a full set of hosts. This last week was pretty busy with announcements and presentations from the Google Next conference. In 2018, they previewed some security tools, and this year, many, if not all of them, are now GA, along with a lot of other very developer-oriented services. So, Matt, John, thanks for bringing a full cohort of co-hosts to Application Security Weekly.
Oh, good morning, good morning. It's tax day.
It is tax day. Although on my radar, yesterday was the birthday of Bruce Sterling, one of the progenitors of cyberpunk. So hopefully everybody paid their taxes, but then also did something cyberpunky. I don't know what that is. Put on some neon goggles or something. So I don't know how much you guys saw everything that Google Next was announcing last week, but one of the fun things they did was for developers, roll a whole bunch of ways to control containers, control Kubernetes into IDEs. So now for IntelliJ Visual Studio, you can basically, as a developer, not leave your friendly developer environment. But also on what I saw were some cool things that they were doing around security. So they've even got like their security scanner that does things like some basic cross-site scripting, looking at outdated libraries. So that was a pretty cool addition to the whole cloud platform that stood out for me.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the interesting part here in the announcements last week, a lot of partner announcements, by the way, which I tried to not include into the Google Next conversation, but integration of tools to the developers, right? We've talked about this for a while, that integration of these tools into the existing developer tools are an important part, not only for cloud solutions, but I also think security solutions. So the announcements around the integration into the IDEs makes logical sense. It makes it really easy for the developers to leverage containers and Kubernetes and other aspects of these containerized application tools into their IDEs. All good. But the same will have to happen on the security side. And what I couldn't quite get to was how much of this is integrated into some of the existing tool sets, or are they really just more integrated into the Google Cloud platform environment. But it's that integration of these tools that I think are going to continue to be important if we truly want to get to this concept of DevSecOps.
Yeah, and I think that that's a great distinction, because one of the things that's a common theme among DevSecOps, especially, is bringing that security to where the actual developers are and where they're working. And so that, in this case, pulling into just some tools for Google Cloud Control into the IDE is awesome. And that really, to be successful, needs to pull those tools, those security tools, into Google Cloud, of course, so you have that nice browser-based interface, but also, as much as possible, just bring that into the IDE, or bring it into those familiar spots in the CI/CD pipeline for the developers, just so they don't have to open a new window, so they don't have to go somewhere else for security. And I think in this case, there's possibly two angles that stood out for me. One was, as somebody who's always enjoyed playing with scanners, seeing that cloud security scanner be a first-class entity within the Google Cloud environment was pretty cool. As well as they're also looking at DLP, because I think even Amazon is also has their own solution for acknowledging, great, we've convinced all these developers to build out their systems in the cloud, put all their data in the cloud, but all their data is potentially dangerous, and it's not potentially protected as well, and there needs to be a way to make sure it's not being exfiltrated. And I think the other thing that was going to that was on my mind there is that Google Next, some of their smaller security aspects were more on the operations side, because there's that notorious aspect of either an S3 bucket or an Elasticsearch over on AWS being the new type of breach. So it's almost like, who cares anymore that there's a SQL injection vuln? Who cares anymore that even having to steal credentials or scrape GitHub for developers accidentally posting secrets? All you need to do is keep scanning on a daily basis for S3 buckets or Elasticsearch buckets that are publicly exposed. Look what data is inside there, and then pull out whether it's voting records, personal PII type of information, other types of sensitive information. So one of the cool things here that Google did was throw in their equivalent of being able to monitor and look for those types of misconfigurations in their storage solutions. So that way, at least it's trying to avoid those easy mistakes, or very, very impactful mistakes that developers can make when they're taking advantage of all of this easily IDE controlled and deployed storage, but then a lot of data that's going into that storage that isn't supposed to be public.
I'm really looking forward to a chance of playing with these things, because what sort of, from a user experience point of view, I want to see how well they fit into that IDE. You're in the zone, you're coding something, you've got your game on, you're on a deadline, you're trying to get something done, and all of a sudden this error message pops up on the screen with something about one of these things we're talking about. I hope they've managed to make it so it happens without being completely disastrously distracting what someone's doing. But with that aside, I think, as you guys are saying, it's a great idea. The sooner we can get developers have that information in their hands so they can act upon it, it's nothing but good stuff for them. So great news.
Yeah, and it was pretty interesting, especially too when disasters happen, mistakes happen. One of the interesting things watching their developers keynote is they were bringing on more first-class ability to call it threat model or disaster model, and basically do some tabletop exercises. Essentially D&D. LARPing, things that are close to my heart, but about your runtime environment and your operation environment. So you can kind of say, what happens if this service goes down? Or what happens if this storage bucket blows up? Or either goes public, or we were using it for our static, as a static CDN, and it goes private, and we're DOSing our site. And it's sort of call back to that idea of even Netflix's chaos engineering. Just let's make bad things happen and try to do it in a relatively controlled environment so we can react to it more quickly. And it doesn't necessarily have a direct theme of security, but being able to either one, recover from mistakes is really good, because it gives you that exercise to be able to respond and deploy quickly, which when you've got that 0 day, or you've got something nasty comes in through your bug bounty program, or some other type of vuln, you want to be able to have that flexibility to respond quickly and be able to roll something out without going through a lot of different hoops.
That's really so great to hear. And I mean that sincerely. I was actually thinking about asking, or sort of, how will I say, thought experimenting here on the podcast about, it'd be really cool if you brought that back to the development stage or the design stage. To hear that they're actually thinking about that and providing tools just to get people to ask that question. That's awesome. I hope that gets heavily used.
Yeah, I hope so, because it's been 20 or so years that since Stride and Dread have been called out and referenced. But even here's maybe a shout out to the community. Looking at even like OWASP's repository, they have some good documentation on threat modeling, and there have been some false starts, some decent starts on tooling around just security specific threat modeling. It would be great to see that mature and figure out how to bring that ability into the IDE, if that's the theme of the day, just so developers could even annotate their code and say, here's what I'm worried about, here's what might go wrong, and you know what, at the moment I don't know what to do about it. And that'd be a great thing to call out. That's your red swiggle, if you will, of your autocorrect or your security correct, where your application security team or your DevSecOps team can come follow up on.
Yeah, how amazing would that be? It's I have to tell a funny. I know Matt was trying to get in here, but I'm going to tell one funny from the weekend. I can't remember what I was searching for. I was Googling around for something, and I landed upon this, what turned out to be an April Fool's page, but it was a press release saying that all the major Linux distributions had agreed to remove VI from the base installation. And then it sort of dragged you on for a few paragraphs, so I got suckered into this. And then when it started saying that they were actually going to replace VI with Visual Studio Code as the base editor, I'm like, okay, there's something's not quite right here. But IDEs have their places. They're not for everywhere.
Yeah, but it's the and it's the interdependency that I think is the hardest challenge now. If we think about all the different pieces we integrate in to a new application, threat modeling gets harder because I'm dependent on so many other sources, either from a binary library perspective or from a service perspective in the cloud, right? An S3 bucket or different aspects of the application. And so as a developer, I think it's really difficult to understand all those interdependencies and where are potential threats to the application as a whole, because things are so distributed across all these different services now. If there are now tools that allow the developers to get a better idea, I'm not saying resolve it, but at least a better idea of where some of the potential threats are and some of the interdependencies of their code are, maybe they start thinking about better resilience in the applications if a particular service goes down, for example. So I think that's all good as we continue to look, move forward in the whole DevOps component. What I'd also like to see then is continue that tighter integration of the security tools into that as well, because now it's not only just a resiliency from a service perspective, but maybe also now more security vulnerability information that also drives that broader threat modeling.
Mm-hmm. And then the other interesting thing over at from Google Next last week is they came out, or I guess went to general release, Anthos. They're a hybrid and multi-cloud platform. So this is a really big deal, right? It's how do you actually, these Kubernetes things are so difficult to manage and so difficult to take care of, and then the patching and all this other stuff we have to deal with. So having Google the ability to manage that for you both on site and now being able to burst that into a cloud, and then also maybe burst over to other providers, right? We always talk about for the last 10 years, you should be locked into a single cloud provider and you should be using multiple. How many of us actually do this? But we all know it's a best practice. So it's interesting to see Google have that tool come out to general release. And it's actually, they've done a really great job here. It's I'll try and get this into the show notes afterwards, but a mixture of DKE, which they will patch for you, Istio for a mesh networking on top of that, and service discovery. They're actually also bundling in part of their acquisition from Velistrata. So they now have the ability to do take a physical machine on-prem and turn it into either a Google VM for GCP or into a container. So you're able to actually now do that all in this one sort of hybrid tool. Configuration management, centralized logging, again, all these things we keep talking about that people should be doing. And then also bringing into this the marketplace. So it looks like a really cool solution. Microsoft's catching up on them as quickly as they can, but it's going to be really interesting to see how these two guys go.
Yeah, what I thought was interesting about this one is really going after support for containers on the competitive platforms, AWS and Azure. Because in kind of the third position, Google's always kind of struggled to figure out its differentiation in the cloud market, right? AWS number one, Microsoft Azure number two. What was Google Cloud Platform? How was it going to differentiate itself to get it? Is this the differentiator? I thought security could be one of those differentiators for Google. I think Amazon has done a pretty good job with building security tools in. Obviously, Google's made some plays here, but is Anthos, this managed service around the containerized environment in different areas, does this become that competitive differentiator that Google needed?
Quite possibly. That's obviously what they're going for, and they're trying to get that. I think they jumped over Amazon when they announced this last year. It sort of came a little unexpected. What's interesting now to see is when you dig into details, right? That's where this stuff always gets interesting. With the Google on-prem, managed on-prem, it turns out they're actually right now just supporting VMware. So they claim they're going to add support. So what they do is they deliver you a VM image, which then you go and run, X number of those, and that's how they manage into your environment, probably VPNs back to them, that type of thing. But so it's interesting to see they started with a VMware. So again, Matt, going towards what you're saying, they're looking to get into that enterprise customer that is already accustomed to using these sort of commercialized tools. So yeah, they're up on this round of leapfrog. We'll see what happens next.
Right, because we've seen discussions from Microsoft about aspects of this, right? With MAAS, right? The Microsoft Azure stack, where you could take the Azure stack that's running in the cloud, bring it down to on-prem and kind of hybridize, but that's still very Azure focused. This is bring down a stack, and oh, by the way, you can run it in GCP, AWS, or Azure, which is definitely different than what Microsoft was trying to do with MAAS.
Yeah, and I think it's just a matter of time now that the other two are going to have this similar type of concept. Well, let's not forget about IBM, the other three, but having that concept of being able to help a customer in each other's cloud. It's going to become a little bit gray line. Where does this go in 5 or 10 years? Do we start seeing these guys actually maybe some larger acquisitions and they become one company again or something? Probably not, but it's interesting to think about how that's going to play out.
And it's interesting too that bringing up Azure, Matt, that and talking about can security be one of the areas of competitive, along that dimension. Recently, Azure has been trialing basically their binary fuzzing in the cloud. So fuzzing historically has been a fantastic tool for discovering vulns in all kinds of open source software. Chrome uses it a lot. Obviously, it was a lot of Google developers, a lot of Google security engineers were pushing on this with American Fuzzy Loop. And so to see in this case, to see Microsoft also now to say, we are going to have a cloud-based fuzzing environment where essentially upload your binary, upload a couple instructions to be able to say, how can we, seed some ways to start fuzzing that binary? And then we will scale it out for you. We'll run it for you, and we'll give you some feedback about what might, what the crashes look like that you might want to follow up on. That's another kind of compelling area from that security angle, just to see if you're already hooked into their cloud, what additional things can you do to take advantage of their cloud services to secure your environment?
Yeah, I signed up for the beta of it. I can't wait to play with it. I mean, I've used these fuzzers in the past. The big thing for me was setting them up and getting them going, right? it sounds very simple at first that I want to fuzz my application, but then when you start thinking about, okay, well, how do you actually do that? Where are my inputs or outputs? Where do I actually, what should the input look like? And then how do I, create how do I customize my fuzzer to actually be able to start with good input and then start breaking it down and seeing what happens with the different fields? So I'm really, it's Microsoft. And again, I talk a lot about user experience. I'm really excited to see how easy have they made it. Is it going to take someone to go through a few classes first to learn how to use a fuzzer, or is it really that simple? And then you mentioned there, Mike, that one of the real key things, which I'm hearing people get nervous about already, I have to upload my binary to the cloud. For a lot of us, that's very commonplace nowadays. But I think that's going to be one of the bigger stumbling blocks. So we'll have to see what the adoption is like for the tool.
That's when that'll be interesting.
That complaint that that the cloud is dangerous has been that SaaS talking point or counterpoint or something point for a long time. So yeah, hopefully that concern will be diminished, and the trade-offs here of just saying let's go fuzz it, find those vulns, and improve it will be great.
So we have a problem uploading our binary to the cloud, but we have no problems pulling binaries down from the cloud from GitHub as the basis for a container in the first place. Okay, I mean, a lot of the dependencies we're already pulling from the cloud. Yeah, I get it, your custom code's in there. But if you're getting benefit by identifying potential vulnerabilities in your custom code along with all the embedded libraries that you're doing, isn't there some value there to re-upload at least part of that code? Anyways, it's interesting how we work.
Yeah, very interesting. If you're not to build a consistent story, if you're not already doing something strong around how you're controlling what the third-party libraries are that are pulled into your system, you're actually even checking the signatures of them, so that rather than just downloading and using them, and then the other aspect, you're actually checking them for known vulnerabilities and updating them on a regular basis. You got to have that good, consistent story too, if you're going to also throw shade against, uploading binaries into the cloud.
Another opportunity to integrate something into the IDE, right?
Exactly. Everything will be in IDE. I'll have to learn like the 12th command in VI now.
Yeah, it'll be one big IDE, and everything will be integrated into it. Yeah.
There's an Emacs joke in there somewhere.
Yeah, I think it was Jamie Zawinski, old school creator of one of the early browser hackers, and I think his comment was every piece of software continues to expand until it eventually supports mail. So once VI and Visual Studio start supporting email, we know we've come full circle.
I bet we're there already. That's one of those things I might have to go check for the mail client for Visual Studio Code after this.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other big announcements out of Google Next last week? I saw a lot of partner announcements, but I didn't see much outside maybe their AI platform. But I mean, we already knew they were they were already in the AI area, so I don't know how much news this really is.
Yeah, I don't know I think that's a nice teaser for some interesting AI related news we've got coming up in our next segment though. So maybe we can use that as a good segue.
Perfect.